The year was 2387. Earth, once a thriving planet filled with life and energy, now stood eerily silent. Its cities were empty, its skies devoid of airplanes or birds, and its oceans still but lifeless. Humanity had vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but their buildings, machines, and unanswered questions. It wasn't just one city or country, it was the entire planet. Billions of people disappeared overnight, as if they had simply stepped out of existence. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of war or disaster, just silence. Among those left behind were members of the Council, an intergalactic governing body that worked to maintain peace among alien civilizations across the galaxy. They had been on Earth for diplomatic negotiations when humanity disappeared. Their mission had been simple: discuss trade agreements and resource sharing between humans and other species, but now their purpose had shifted. They were stranded on a ghost planet, trying to figure out what had happened to its inhabitants. Yoon-sik, the head of security for the council delegation, walked through what used to be Seoul's bustling city center. He moved slowly, his boots crunching against broken glass scattered on the ground. His sharp eyes scanned the abandoned streets, searching for any clue, any sign of where humanity might have gone. Buildings loomed around him like hollow skeletons, their windows shattered and walls covered in vines that seemed to grow faster than usual. The air smelled stale, heavy with the scent of decay and metal. Beside him walked Ji-yoon, a scientist who specialized in xenobiology, the study of alien life forms. She carried a tablet in her hands, its screen glowing faintly in the dim light. Her face was pale, her dark hair tied back into a messy bun. She looked tired, her eyes wide with confusion and fear, as she scrolled through fragments of data she had collected from Earth's remaining digital systems. "Where did they go?" Ji-yoon whispered, more to herself than to Yoon-sik. "No evacuation. Plans, no mass graves. It's like they just evaporated." Yoon-sik clenched his fists, his jaw tightened as he tried to process the enormity of the situation. "We need answers, and fast," he said firmly. "If word gets out about this, every species in the galaxy will think we're responsible." Ji-yoon nodded, though part of her doubted anyone outside Earth would believe such a story. How could they? Even standing here, surrounded by the remnants of human civilization, it felt impossible to comprehend. Humanity didn't just vanish. That wasn't how things worked. And yet, here they were. As they continued walking, Yoon-sik noticed something strange up ahead. A flickering street lamp cast long shadows across the pavement, illuminating a pile of discarded belongings. A child's toy, a tattered jacket, a pair of shoes lying haphazardly next to each other. It looked like someone had dropped everything mid-step and kept moving. But where? "Look at this," Yoon-sik said, pointing at the items. "It's almost like they were running away from something." Ji-yoon knelt down to examine the objects more closely. She picked up the toy, turning it over in her hands. It was a small robot, its plastic surface cracked and dusty. She pressed a button on its chest, and to her surprise it lit up briefly before dying again. "This is recent," she murmured. "Whoever, or whatever, did this must have acted quickly. Too quickly for anyone to react." Yoon-sik frowned. "You think it was some kind of attack? A weapon?" "I don't know," Ji-yoon admitted. "But I've been analyzing Earth's old databases. There are mentions of experiments involving quantum mechanics and consciousness transfer. Some of the files are encrypted, so I can't access all the details yet, but..." She trailed off, her voice trembling slightly. What if humanity didn't leave physically? What if they found a way to move themselves somewhere else? Yoon-sik stared at her, his expression unreadable. "You mean, like, transferring their minds?" Ji-yoon nodded. "It's possible. If they succeeded, their bodies would be left behind while their consciousnesses went somewhere else, somewhere we can't see or reach." Before Yoon-sik could respond, a loud noise echoed through the empty streets. It sounded like metal scraping against concrete, followed by a low rumble that made the ground vibrate beneath their feet. Both of them froze, exchanging nervous glances. "What was that?" Ji-yoon asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Yunsik replied, gripping the handle of his plasma rifle. Stay close. They cautiously approached the source of the sound, which seemed to come from an underground parking garage nearby. The entrance was dark, the fluorescent lights overhead flickering weakly. As they stepped inside, the air grew colder, and the smell of dampness mixed with rust filled their nostrils. The rumbling grew louder, accompanied by faint mechanical whirring. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner of Yunsik's vision. He spun around, raising his weapon, but saw nothing. Something's here, he muttered, scanning the area. Ji-Yun clutched her tablet tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. Do you think it's related to the disappearance? Before Yunsik could answer, the ground shook violently, nearly knocking them off their feet. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the sound of grinding metal grew deafening. Then, from the shadows, a massive figure emerged. It was unlike anything either of them had ever seen. Standing nearly 10 feet tall, the creature, or machine, was a hybrid of organic tissue and gleaming metal. Its limbs were long and angular, ending in razor-sharp claws. Its head was smooth and featureless, except for 2 glowing red eyes that fixed on them with cold precision. You are not authorized, it intoned in a deep, mechanical voice. Yunsik raised his rifle and fired without hesitation. The blast hit the creature squarely in the chest, but it barely flinched. Instead, it took a step forward, its claws clicking against the concrete floor. We need to get out of here, Ji-Yun shouted, backing away. Yunsik grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the exit. Behind them, the creature let out a guttural roar, shaking the entire structure. They ran as fast as they could, dodging falling debris and leaping over abandoned cars. When they finally burst into the daylight, both of them were breathing heavily, their hearts racing. What the hell was that thing? Yunsik demanded, glancing back at the garage. I don't know, Ji-Yun said, still clutching her tablet. But I think it knows something about what happened to humanity. Yunsik frowned, his mind racing. Whatever that thing was, it clearly wasn't friendly. And if there were more of them, the council was in serious trouble. For now, though, they had escaped. But as they stood there, catching their breath and staring at the ruins of a once great city, neither of them could shake the feeling that they were being watched. Something, or someone, was still out there, guarding the secrets of humanity's disappearance. And it wasn't going to let them uncover the truth easily. The discovery of the mysterious creature in the underground parking garage left Yunsik and Ji-Yun shaken. They returned to the council's temporary base, a repurposed office building in Seoul, to report what they had seen. Their colleagues listened intently, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outright fear. None of them could explain what the creature was or why it had attacked. But one thing was clear. Humanity's disappearance wasn't as simple as it seemed over the Next few days, the council began piecing together fragments of information. Power grids in certain areas were still operational, despite the absence of human operators. Satellites orbiting Earth continued transmitting data, though much of it was garbled or incomplete. Ji-Yun spent hours poring over these transmissions, her tablet glowing softly in the dim light of the makeshift lab. She noticed patterns, repeating sequences of numbers and symbols that hinted at something far more complex than random interference. There's a structure here, she muttered to herself, her fingers flying across the screen. It's not just noise. Someone, or something, is trying to communicate. Yunsik entered the room, his face grim. He carried a stack of printed documents, their edges frayed from repeated handling. We found more anomalies, he said, placing the papers on the table beside her. Reports of strange energy readings coming from underground facilities. Whatever happened to humanity, it might be connected to what's happening below the surface. Ji-Yun looked up, her eyes narrowing. Underground facilities, like bunkers or research labs? Possibly, Yunsik replied. But we don't know for sure. That's why I'm leading a team to investigate. We're heading to an old government site near Busan tomorrow morning. Ji-Yun hesitated, then stood up. I'm coming with you. Yunsik frowned. It's too dangerous. You're a scientist, not a soldier. And you're not going into unknown territory without someone who can analyze what you find, she shot back. Besides, if those energy readings are real, they could hold the key to understanding what happened to humanity. I need to be there. After a moment of silence, Yunsik sighed. Fine, but you stay behind me at all times. No arguments. The journey to Busan was tense. The group traveled in armored vehicles, their engines rumbling through deserted highways littered with abandoned cars. The landscape outside was desolate, overgrown with vegetation that seemed to thrive in the absence of human activity. Birds flitted between trees, and deer wandered freely through fields once cultivated by farmers. It was as if nature itself was reclaiming the planet. When they arrived at the facility, it was hidden beneath layers of dirt and debris. A rusted sign marked the entrance, its letters faded but still legible. National Research Institute. Yoon-sik led the way, his rifle raised as they descended into the darkness. The air grew colder the deeper they went, carrying a faint metallic tang that made Ji-eun wrinkle her nose. Inside, the facility was vast and labyrinthine. Rows of corridors stretched in every direction, lined with doors labeled with cryptic codes. Some rooms contained rows of computers, their screens black and lifeless. Others held shelves stacked with dusty files and equipment. It was clear that this place had been important, but for what purpose? "This is incredible," Ji-eun whispered, her voice echoing off the walls. "If we can access these systems, we might finally get some answers." Hae-jun, one of Yoon-sik's subordinates, nodded. "Let's split up. We'll cover more ground." "That way." "No," Yoon-sik said sharply. "We stick together. If something happens, we need to be able to defend ourselves." As they explored further, they stumbled upon a massive chamber at the heart of the facility. The sight took their breath away. Rows upon rows of cryogenic pods lined the walls, each containing a human body suspended in translucent liquid. The faces inside were peaceful, almost serene, as if they were merely sleeping. "What is this?" Hae-jun asked, his voice trembling. Ji-eun stepped closer, her eyes wide with awe and dread. These must have been part of some kind of preservation project. Maybe they were preparing for long-term space travel, or something else entirely. Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a low hum filled the air, growing louder and more intense. In the center of the chamber, a massive machine began to power up. Its core glowed faintly blue, pulsating with energy that cast eerie shadows. "Across the walls! This isn't natural!" Hae-jun muttered, backing away. "Whatever this is, it wasn't meant to be contained." Suddenly the ground trembled violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the sound of grinding metal echoed through the chamber. A low growl reverberated through the air, growing louder with each passing second. "Something's coming," Yoon-sik said, raising his rifle. "Everyone, brace yourselves!" From the shadows emerged more of the creatures they had encountered earlier. Towering hybrids of flesh and metal, they moved with terrifying precision, their red eyes fixed on the intruders. There were at least half a dozen of them, surrounding the group with no clear escape route. "You are not authorized," one of them intoned, raising a clawed hand toward Yoon-sik. "Fire!" Yoon-sik shouted, unleashing a barrage of plasma shots. The blasts struck the nearest creature, causing sparks to fly from its metallic frame. But it barely slowed down, advancing relentlessly. Hae-jun fired his weapon wildly, panic overtaking him. One of the creatures lunged at him, its claws slicing through the air. He screamed as it grabbed him, lifting him off the ground before throwing him against the wall. His body crumpled to the floor, motionless. "We have to retreat!" Yoon-sik yelled, grabbing Ji-eun's arm. "Now!" Ji-eun hesitated, her gaze locked on the fallen Hae-jun. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she knew they couldn't afford to stay. She turned and followed Yoon-sik as he led the remaining members of the team toward the exit. Behind them, the creatures gave chase, their mechanical footsteps pounding against the floor. They ran through the winding corridors, dodging debris and leaping over obstacles. The facility seemed endless, its maze-like layout working against them. Just when it felt like they would never reach the surface, they spotted a sliver of daylight ahead, the entrance. Bursting into the open air, they collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. The creatures didn't follow them outside, retreating back into the depths of the facility. But none of them felt safe. Not after what they had seen. Back at the council's base, Ji-eun sat alone in the lab, staring at the notes she had taken during their exploration. Her mind raced with questions. What were those creatures? Why had they attacked? And most importantly, what was the purpose of the cryogenic pods and the glowing machine? She opened one of the encrypted files she had downloaded from the facility's servers. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, incomprehensible at first glance. But as she worked, a pattern began to emerge. Words started to form, phrases that sent chills down her spine. Project Exile, Quantum Entanglement, Consciousness Transfer. Ji-yoon's hands trembled as she read the words aloud. They weren't preserving bodies, she whispered. They were preparing to leave them behind. Her thoughts turned to the creatures. If humanity had transferred their consciousnesses somewhere else, why had they left those machines behind? Were they guardians, protectors, or something far more sinister? As she sat there, lost in thought, she realized the horrifying truth. Humanity hadn't just disappeared, they had transcended, and whatever secrets they had taken with them, the machines were determined to keep hidden. But Ji-yoon wasn't ready to give up. She needed answers, and she would stop at nothing to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing the creatures again. Ji-yoon stared at the encrypted files on her tablet, the words Project Exile glowing faintly in the dim light of the lab. Her mind raced as she pieced together what she had learned. Humanity hadn't just vanished. They had deliberately left, their physical bodies behind, transferring their consciousness into some other realm. But where? And why had they created those machines? The towering hybrids of metal and flesh that now guarded Earth's secrets. Yoon-sik entered the room, his expression grim. He carried a tray with 2 cups of coffee, placing one gently on the table beside her. "You've been at this for hours," he said quietly. "You need to rest." "I can't," Ji-yoon replied without looking up. "Every second we waste is another second those things are out there, keeping us from the truth. If we don't figure out what happened, we'll never understand why humanity left, or how to bring them back." Yoon-sik sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We lost Hai-jun because we underestimated them. Next time it could be you or me. Or worse, everyone." Ji-yoon finally looked up, her eyes filled with determination. "Then we prepare better. We learn more about them before we go back. Those machines, they're not random. They were built for a purpose. If we can figure out what that purpose is, maybe we can reason with them." "Reason with them?" Yoon-sik raised an eyebrow. "They attacked us on sight. I don't think they're interested in talking." "Maybe not yet," Ji-yoon admitted. "But if they're guarding humanity's secrets, then they must have some kind of logic driving them. Something we can use to our advantage." The two of them spent the rest of the night planning their next move. Ji-yoon analyzed the data she had collected, searching for clues about the machine's design and programming. Meanwhile, Yoon-sik coordinated with the remaining members of the council delegation, gathering weapons and equipment for another expedition. By morning, they were ready. Armed with plasma rifles, EMP grenades, and portable scanners, the team set out once again. This time, their destination was a facility located deep beneath Mount Baekdu, a dormant volcano on the border between North Korea and China. Satellite readings had detected unusual energy signals emanating from the area, suggesting it might hold answers to humanity's disappearance. The journey was grueling. The terrain was rugged and unforgiving, with jagged rocks and steep cliffs making progress slow. As they approached the mountain, the air grew colder, and a thick mist enveloped the landscape. It felt as though the earth itself was trying to keep them away. When they reached the entrance to the underground facility, it was concealed behind layers of rock and vegetation. Using specialized tools, the team cleared a path, revealing a heavy, steel door marked with faded insignias. Yoon-sik entered first, his rifle raised and his senses sharp. The others followed closely, their footsteps echoing softly in the narrow tunnel. Inside, the facility was eerily similar to the one near Busan. Rows of cryogenic pods lined the walls, though these were empty, their liquids drained and their occupants long gone. In the center of the main chamber stood another massive machine, its core glowing faintly blue. But this one was different. It was surrounded by panels displaying streams of text and images as if it were communicating something. This looks like a control hub, Ji-eun said, stepping closer. She activated her scanner, which began analyzing the machine's energy output. If I can interface with it, maybe I can access its systems. Be careful, Yoon-sik warned. We don't know what will happen if you tamper with it. Ji-eun nodded, her hands steady as she connected her tablet to the machine. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, faster than she could read. Then suddenly the text slowed, forming coherent sentences. Sentinels activated. Unauthorized presence detected. Before Ji-eun could react, the ground trembled violently. Alarms blared throughout the facility and the lights flickered, casting the room in alternating shadows and flashes of harsh brightness. From the corners of the chamber, the machines emerged, dozens of them this time, their red eyes glowing. Ominously! You triggered them! Yoon-sik shouted, raising his rifle. I didn't mean to, Ji-eun stammered, disconnecting her tablet. It must have sensed my connection. The sentinels advanced, their movements synchronized and precise. Each step echoed like thunder, shaking the very foundation of the facility. The team opened fire, unleashing a barrage of plasma shots. Some of the machines faltered, sparks flying from their metallic frames, but most kept moving, undeterred by the attacks. We can't fight all of them, one of the team members yelled, panic rising in his voice. Fall back, Yoon-sik commanded, grabbing Ji-eun's arm. Stick together! They retreated down a corridor, the sentinels close behind. The narrow passageway forced the machines to move in single file, giving the team a slight advantage. Yoon-sik tossed an EMP grenade into the crowd, causing several sentinels to short-circuit and collapse. But for everyone they disabled, two more seemed to take its place. As they ran, Ji-eun noticed something strange. The walls of the corridor were covered in symbols, etched deeply into the metal, almost like warnings. She paused briefly to examine them, her heart pounding as she realized their meaning. These aren't just decorations, she said breathlessly. They're instructions, commands for the sentinels. What kind of commands? Yoon-sik asked, glancing over his shoulder. I'm not sure yet, Ji-eun admitted. But if we can override their programming, there's no time. Yoon-sik interrupted, pulling her forward. We need to focus on surviving right now. Finally, they reached a large storage room filled with crates and machinery. Yoon-sik ordered everyone to take cover behind the crates while he devised a plan. The sentinels poured into the room, their glowing eyes scanning the area. For a moment, everything was silent, the tension so thick it felt suffocating. Then Ji-eun had an idea. She remembered the control hub they had encountered earlier, the one displaying streams of text. If she could mimic those commands using her tablet, maybe she could confuse the sentinels long enough for the team to escape. I need a distraction, she whispered to Yoon-sik. Something to draw their attention away from me. Yoon-sik hesitated, then nodded. I'll handle it. Just make it quick. He stood up, firing his rifle directly at the nearest sentinel. The loud blasts drew the machine's attention, causing them to turn toward him. While they focused on Yoon-sik, Ji-eun worked frantically, entering lines of code into her tablet. Her fingers flew across the screen, her mind racing as she tried to replicate the commands she had seen earlier. Seconds later, the sentinels froze mid-step. Their glowing eyes dimmed slightly, and their heads tilted as if processing new information. Ji-eun held her breath, praying her plan would work. You are unauthorized, one of the sentinels intoned, its voice cold and mechanical. Explain your presence. Ji-eun stepped forward, her tablet held out in front of her. We mean no harm, she said, her voice trembling but firm. We seek understanding. Humanity entrusted you to guard their secrets, but we only wish to learn. For a moment, the sentinels remained motionless. Then, unexpectedly, they stepped aside, clearing a path toward the exit. You may leave, the lead sentinel declared. Do not return. Yoon-sik stared at the machines in disbelief. That's it? Just like that? Ji-eun nodded, clutching her tablet tightly. They recognized the commands. They weren't programmed to negotiate, but they follow orders. Without wasting another second, the team hurried out of the facility. Once outside, they collapsed onto the rocky ground, exhausted but alive. None of them spoke as they caught their breath, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Back at the council's base, Ji-eun replayed the encounter in her mind. The Sentinels weren't mindless killers. They were guardians bound by strict protocols. But who had given them those protocols? And what exactly were they guarding? As she reviewed the data she had collected, Ji-Yun realized the horrifying truth. Humanity hadn't abandoned Earth. They had transcended it. And the Sentinels were anchors, ensuring that humanity could never return unless certain conditions were met. But Ji-Yun wasn't ready to give up. She knew the answers were within reach. Somewhere, hidden in the depths of Earth's forgotten facilities, lay the key to humanity's fate, and she would stop at nothing to find it. The discovery of the Sentinels and their role as guardians of humanity's secrets had shaken the Council to its core. When Ji-Un and Yoon-sik returned to the orbital station above Earth, they immediately called an emergency meeting. The room was tense, filled with representatives from various alien species who were part of the Council's delegation. Some leaned forward in their seats, eager for answers, while others sat stiffly, their expressions unreadable. Ji-Un stood at the center of the room, her tablet projecting holographic images of the Sentinels and data she had collected during their expeditions. Her voice was steady but tinged with urgency as she explained what they had uncovered. "Humanity didn't vanish randomly," she began. "They left on purpose. Through advanced technology involving quantum mechanics and consciousness transfer, they moved themselves into another dimension, a parallel existence beyond our reach." A murmur rippled through the room. Some delegates exchanged skeptical glances while others whispered among themselves. One of the representatives, a reptilian-like being named Varnock, raised his hand, his claws clicking softly against the table. "If what you're saying is true, then why leave behind these machines? Why not take them along?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Ji-Yun replied. "The Sentinels appear to be anchors, guardians designed to ensure humanity cannot return unless certain conditions are met. They operate under strict protocols, and any unauthorized presence is seen as a threat." Da-Hyun, the leader of the council, leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes locked onto Ji-Un. She was a tall woman with silver hair and an imposing presence that commanded respect. "And you believe this parallel dimension exists?" she asked, her tone skeptical yet curious. "I do," Ji-Un said firmly. "The evidence supports it. Humanity's experiments with quantum entanglement weren't just theoretical, they were practical. They succeeded in creating a bridge between dimensions, leaving their physical bodies behind as empty shells." Another representative, a slender insectoid creature named Zixar, chimed in. "But if humanity has truly transcended, why should we care? Let them remain in their new realm." "What does this have to do with us?" Yoon-sik stepped forward, his jaw tight with frustration. "Because Earth is still here, and so are the Sentinels. If we don't understand their purpose or how to disable them, we risk triggering something catastrophic. Those machines are powerful, and they won't hesitate to attack anyone they see as a threat." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Da-Hyun tapped her fingers on the table, deep in thought. Finally, she spoke. "This changes everything. We came here to negotiate trade agreements and resource sharing, but now we're faced with a far greater challenge. Humanity's disappearance leaves a void, not just on Earth, but across the galaxy. Other civilizations will want answers, and if word gets out about the Sentinels, they'll panic," Varnock interrupted. "Some might even call for Earth's destruction to prevent the Sentinels from spreading." Ji-Yeon felt a chill run down her spine. She hadn't considered that possibility before. To many species, Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a potential threat. If the Council couldn't find a way to neutralize the Sentinels, they might decide the safest option was to destroy the entire planet. "We can't let that happen," Ji-Yeon said, her voice rising slightly. "Earth holds too much knowledge, too many secrets. If we abandon it now, we'll lose our chance to understand what humanity achieved, maybe even learn how to follow them someday." Da-Hyun raised an eyebrow. "Follow them? You think we should pursue humanity into this parallel dimension?" "It's worth considering," Ji-Yeon admitted. "If they found a way to transcend their physical limitations, imagine what that could mean for other species. But first, we need to focus on understanding the Sentinels. If we can communicate with them, or override their programming, we might be able to coexist." The debate raged on for hours, growing increasingly heated. Some members of the council argued for immediate action, insisting that Earth posed too great a risk. Others sided with Ji-un, urging caution and further investigation. By the time the meeting ended, no consensus had been reached. Da-hyun dismissed everyone except Yoon-sik and Ji-un, signaling that she wanted to speak with them privately. Once the room was empty, Da-hyun turned to face them, her expression grim. "I've made my decision," she said. "We'll give you 1 more week to gather evidence and determine whether Earth can be salvaged. After that, I'll convene another meeting, and if progress hasn't been made, I'll recommend total planetary quarantine." "Quarantine?" Yoon-sik asked, his voice tight with disbelief. "That's almost as bad as destruction." "It's the only compromise I can offer right now," Da-hyun replied. "Many members of the council are afraid. They see Earth as a ticking time bomb, and I can't ignore their concerns. Prove me wrong, or prepare for the consequences." With that, she left the room, leaving Yoon-sik and Ji-un alone. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of Da-hyun's ultimatum hung heavily in the air. "We're running out of time," Yoon-sik said finally, breaking the silence. "If we don't find something concrete soon, Earth is finished." Ji-un nodded, her mind racing. She knew they needed to act quickly, but the risks were enormous. Returning to Earth meant facing the Sentinels again, and possibly losing more lives in the process. Yet staying aboard the orbital station wouldn't solve anything either. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. "Let's go back," Ji-un said suddenly, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "We'll head to the Arctic Circle next. Satellite readings suggest unusual activity there, and if there's anywhere left on Earth that might hold clues, it's there." Yoon-sik studied her for a moment, then sighed. "All right, but we do this carefully. No more reckless moves. If we lose anyone else, I won't forgive myself." That night, as the station orbited silently above Earth, Ji-un lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts kept returning to the Sentinels, their glowing red eyes, their mechanical voices declaring her unauthorized. She replayed their last encounter over and over in her mind, searching for any details she might have missed. One thing stood out: the commands she had entered into her tablet. The Sentinels had responded to them, however briefly. It proved that their programming wasn't inflexible, that there was a way to communicate with them, if only she could decipher their language fully. As she drifted off to sleep, Ji-un resolved to dig deeper. Somewhere beneath Earth's frozen surface, hidden in the remnants of humanity's greatest achievements, lay the key to unlocking the mystery of their departure. And she would stop at nothing to find it, even if it meant risking everything. The journey to the Arctic Circle was unlike anything Ji-un and Yoon-sik had experienced before. The icy winds howled relentlessly, biting at their faces even through layers of protective gear. Snow stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast, white desert that seemed almost alien in its emptiness. Beneath their feet lay kilometers of ice, concealing what satellite readings suggested could be humanity's final project, a facility older and more advanced than any they had encountered so far. Yoon-sik led the team cautiously, his breath visible in the freezing air as he scanned the horizon for signs of danger. Behind him, Ji-un carried her tablet, its screen glowing faintly despite the harsh sunlight reflecting off the snow. She adjusted her goggles, squinting against the glare as she studied the coordinates on her device. "We're close," she said, her voice muffled by the thick scarf wrapped around her face. "Just a little farther." The group trudged forward, their boots crunching through the snow. After hours of travel, they finally reached the location marked on Ji-un's map. At first glance, there was nothing but an endless expanse of ice. But as they began digging, they uncovered a metal hatch buried beneath layers of frost. It was old, its surface rusted and battered, but it still bore faint traces of human design. "This is it," Ji-un whispered, running her gloved hand over the hatch. "Whatever humanity left behind, it's down there." Yoon-sik nodded, signaling for the team to prepare their equipment. Using specialized tools, they pried the hatch open, revealing a narrow staircase leading into darkness. The air that wafted up from below was cold and stale, carrying the faint scent of machinery long abandoned. One by one, they descended, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. Inside, the facility was unlike anything they had seen before. Its walls were smooth and metallic, gleaming faintly in the light of their torches. Unlike the other sites they had explored, this one showed no signs of decay or neglect. Everything appeared perfectly preserved, as if time itself had stopped within these walls. At the heart of the facility lay a massive chamber dominated by a towering machine. Its design was sleek and futuristic, with intricate patterns etched into its surface. In the center of the machine was a glowing core, pulsating softly with a deep blue light. Surrounding it were rows of holographic displays, each projecting streams of data and images too complex to decipher at a glance. Ji-yoon approached the machine, cautiously, her tablet already scanning its energy signature. "This isn't just another control hub," she murmured, her voice filled with awe. "It's something much bigger, something central to humanity's plan." "What do you mean?" Yoon-sik asked, standing guard beside her. "I think this is the origin point," Ji-yoon replied, her eyes wide with excitement. "The place where humanity initiated their transfer. Look at this." She pointed to one of the holograms, which displayed equations and schematics related to quantum mechanics. "These are instructions for creating a bridge between dimensions. Humanity didn't just leave, they transcended. They moved their consciousnesses into a parallel realm, leaving their bodies behind." Yoon-sik frowned, his expression grim. "So they're gone for good?" "Not necessarily," Ji-yoon said. "If we can understand how they did it, maybe we can find a way to follow them, or at least communicate with them." Before they could continue their analysis, the ground trembled violently. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the lights flickered, casting the room in alternating flashes of brightness and shadow. From the corners of the chamber, the sentinels emerged. Dozens of them, their glowing red eyes fixed on the intruders. "You are unauthorized," one of them intoned, raising a clawed hand toward the group. Ji-yoon stepped forward, holding up her tablet. "Wait!" she shouted, her voice trembling but firm. "We're not here to harm you. We only want to understand." The sentinels paused, their movements halting as if processing her words. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension so thick it felt suffocating. Then, unexpectedly, the lead sentinel tilted its head, as if listening to an unheard voice. "You seek understanding," it said, its mechanical tone devoid of emotion. "Prove your worth." Ji-yoon hesitated, glancing at Yoon-sik. He gave her a slight nod, urging her to proceed. Taking a deep breath, she activated her tablet, projecting lines of code onto the nearest holographic display. The sentinels watched intently as the symbols scrolled across the screen, their glowing eyes flickering slightly. After several tense moments, the lead sentinel spoke again. "You have accessed restricted knowledge. Explain your intentions." "We're trying to uncover the truth about humanity's disappearance," Ji-yoon replied. "We believe they left clues here, clues that could help us understand their decision. Please, let us continue our work." The sentinels remained motionless, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the lead sentinel lowered its arm. "You may proceed, but know this: the path is dangerous. Few who walk it return unchanged." With that, the machine stepped aside, clearing a path toward the glowing core. Ji-yoon exchanged a nervous glance with Yoon-sik, then turned back to the machine. Whatever the sentinels meant by the path, she knew they couldn't turn back now. As she connected her tablet to the core, streams of data flooded the screen. Images of distant galaxies, mathematical equations, and fragments of text scrolled past faster than she could read. But one phrase stood out, repeating over and over: "The Exile Protocol." "It's a name," Ji-yoon whispered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. This must have been humanity's final project, the method they used to transcend. Yoon-sik leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "What does it do?" "It creates a bridge," Ji-yoon explained, "a connection between this dimension and another. When humanity activated it, they transferred their consciousnesses into the parallel realm, leaving their physical bodies behind. The sentinels weren't just guardians, they were anchors, ensuring that humanity couldn't return unless certain conditions were met." "But why?" Yoon-sik asked. "Why would they do this? Why leave everything behind?" Ji-yoon shook her head. "I don't know yet. But I think the answers are here, hidden somewhere in this data." As she worked, the core grew brighter, its pulsating light filling the room. The air seemed to hum with energy, vibrating against their skin. Suddenly, the holographic displays shifted, showing new images, visions of Earth as it once was, teeming with life and activity. Then, the scenes changed, depicting humanity's experiments with quantum mechanics, their struggles to perfect the technology, and finally their decision to leave. "They didn't abandon us," Ji-yoon realized, her voice soft with wonder. "They transcended because they believed it was the only way to survive. Their world was dying, and they found a new one, a better one. But they left the Sentinels behind to protect their legacy, to ensure that no one else could misuse their creation." Yoon-sik stared at the images, his expression unreadable. "And now we're stuck here, trying to make sense of what they left behind." Before Ji-yoon could respond, the core emitted a loud hum, growing louder and more intense. The Sentinels stepped forward, forming a protective circle around the machine. "The system is destabilizing," the lead Sentinel announced. "You must leave immediately." Ji-yoon hesitated, unwilling to abandon her work. "We need more time." "There is no time," the Sentinel replied. "The core will overload if you remain." Reluctantly, Ji-yoon disconnected her tablet and backed away, clutching it tightly. As the team hurried toward the exit, the facility began to shake violently. Alarms blared and the lights flickered wildly, casting the room in chaotic bursts of brightness. Just as they reached the staircase, the core exploded in a burst of blue light, sending shockwaves rippling through the chamber. They climbed to the surface as quickly as they could, emerging into the freezing Arctic air. Behind them, the facility collapsed into itself, sealing whatever secrets it held beneath layers of ice and snow. Exhausted and shaken, the team gathered around, catching their breath as they processed what had just happened. "We got lucky," Yoon-sik said finally, breaking the silence. "If those Sentinels hadn't warned us, we wouldn't have made it out alive." Ji-yoon finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we learned enough. Humanity didn't just disappear, they evolved. And if we can figure out how they did it, maybe we can follow them someday." For now, though, they had survived. But as they stood there, staring at the frozen wasteland, stretching endlessly before them, neither of them could shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. Somewhere, beyond the veil of dimensions, humanity's legacy lingered, waiting to be rediscovered.